Welcome to the Climate and Coordination RCAST, where every week we'll be discussing topics related to all things climate change and RChain's role in the solution. We will be discussing technologies that can adapt and coordinate massive amounts of data like never before, forming social architectures that grow collective intelligence, sharing and evaluating data planetarily, all while maintaining personal privacy and personal data ownership. A new decentralized economy is forming as we move from the third industrial revolution, digitization, to the fourth, decarbonization. By building a co-op, built on a correct by construction, concurrent, scalable solution, RChain is structured to build out the new technology that will be required for a flourishing regenerative planet. Please join us on this journey.
Great. Well, welcome everybody to the newest installment of the Climate and Coordination RCAST from RChain. This week we have a lot to talk about. Unfortunately, it's not a very inspirational week, but I think it's a really important time to show up and really bear witness to what is happening, especially on the West Coast. I first just wanted to mention before we get into it that today is September 11th, which is a very emotional anniversary for a lot of people. So I just wanted to acknowledge that we're recording this on September 11th. And I also just wanted to start by mentioning a fantastic film, which I watched last night on Netflix called The Social Dilemma. And The Social Dilemma is a really great film about social media, the age of disinformation, of the sort of fake debate on climate change. And it features a lot of people that RChain really gets inspiration from, like Shoshana Zuboff and Jaron Lanier and some other people. So if anybody's interested in not just what's happening in America with social media, but really what's going on around the world and why there's so much chaos and disorganization. I think The Social Dilemma is a really great film, so maybe we can talk about it in upcoming calls. But the main thing I really wanted to mention is obviously this disaster on the West Coast with the wildfires. So far, it's really affecting Washington, Oregon, California, all of California, and Colorado the most, but I know that it's also affecting Arizona and other states. And I compiled some, just to get us started here, I compiled some facts about the fires, because everybody knows that it's orange outside and it's dangerous air quality and it's terrifying and all that, but I really wanted to compile some actual data about what's going on. So apparently, I'll just start with these. The days with extreme fire conditions in the state of California have doubled since the 1980s. That's from CBS. 15 of the 20 largest fires in California history have been recorded after the year 2000. That's also from CBS. That's a pretty severe statistic. I mean, that's very recently. I have an eyewitness friend of mine who works at Caltech, which is a very important research university and also helps to staff the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, which is basically the engineering and the launch headquarters of NASA, that the Bobcat fire is now within eye distance of you, which just means a couple miles of those places. So that's very, very scary. Not really a fact, but just something I'm really thinking about because it's local to me. More than 3 million acres have already burned in California in 2020 alone, and we're still in the beginning of fire season. That's from BuzzFeed. The August complex fire became, as of Thursday, the largest fire recorded in California history. And I really like that the New York Times here mentions it's 740 square miles at least. And I think that an acre is a kind of difficult area to understand, but 740 square miles is an incredibly large area. Just a few more here. We've lost 1,000 homes in Phoenix. That's from the New York Times from this year's fires. Just in Phoenix alone, we've lost 1,000 homes. There's a town called Malden in the state of Washington that's completely destroyed now. Apparently the fire took its library, post office, city hall, and of course its fire station too. That's from the New York Times. At least 14 people have died so far in these wildfires this year. And that's from NPR. So basically I just wanted to lay out the scale of what's going on and how it's different than in years past. And I also just wanted to open up a discussion about climate anxiety and climate grief, which I feel like is basically a new type of depression. It's a new type of mental illness. And I feel that, myself included, a lot of people are dealing with this really seriously. And if you just Google climate grief or climate anxiety, you'll see that there are dozens and dozens of articles from, major outlets about this. So this is something that we're going to have to deal with. And, obviously we need to talk about how to coordinate around, this terrible situation. So anyway, that's the opener. I would love to invite anyone to jump in and give their thoughts on this terrible moment.
I don't think that the feelings around climate are a mental illness, to be perfectly honest.
I think it would be like a natural reaction.
Response.
Yes, I agree with that. But unfortunately, even if you do have a natural response to something like abuse or trauma, it can develop into something much more serious. You know what I mean?
Yeah, sure. Understood.
Yeah. No, I completely agree, though. If you're not traumatized, then you haven't looked out the window.
Yeah, but I think Nora's point that hits home for me is that I think we always have to kind of watch ourselves and make sure that we're not overwhelmed by grief, because that's not going to help us solve the problem. And one thing that I have a hard time with struggling with is the information that's coming out that indicates that we've already kind of gone past a point where in my lifetime, at least, we're probably not going to see the results of any beneficial work that we do, or not much. So it just, for me, it's hard for me to kind of reconcile with the idea that on my deathbed, even if we kick butt on my deathbed, it will still be getting worse. And all I can think about is just hopefully it'll be better for my daughter. So that kind of I struggle with. Yeah, it's hard to kind of just continually get this kind of every week barrage of new news every day. And the wildfires, just like, as an incredibly terrifying and mortifying story. There's other news that came out this week. There's a headline: rise in sea level from ice melt in Greenland and Antarctica match the worst case scenario. So scientists are now saying that they have to readjust their worst case scenario because of what's been happening. And in this article, it talks about how rapid it is. And it was a quote from a scientist here that says, "I was forced to, by what I saw with my own eyes, face the realization that abrupt climate change is not just a possibility, it's an absolute."
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's amazing how many different things are happening around the world. I mean, there's terrible flooding going on in all sorts of places. And I was just watching a very interesting video on YouTube about the carbon cycle, which is basically the way that Earth's atmosphere, land, and water all basically emit and store carbon in order to create the planet that we've enjoyed for the past, 800 or so thousand years without really much disturbance until recently. And I learned something I didn't realize before, is that apparently warmer ocean water stores less carbon than colder ocean water. So not only as the ocean warms up do we have the sea level rise and the acidification and all this stuff, but we also reduce the ability to store the carbon. So it has to go up into the atmosphere, which heats the water even more. And that's a really interesting aspect of the carbon cycle. But I really enjoyed a tweet that Greta Thunberg put out yesterday or the day before. And, she is always really thinking in a sort of global perspective, which I think is incredibly valuable. And she was basically, just calling attention to the climate crises of the world. And she didn't just post a picture of the fires. She posted a picture of this horrible flood. She posted a picture of Arctic ice melting and the fires and all this stuff together. And it's like, when you look at all of it happening at once, I think it's easy for people to just say one of these things is happening and it's worse than normal. But to say that all of it is happening and it's all worse than normal, I think is a really important distinction to make, because we're living in a world and an age in which these disasters become normalized like extremely quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I was thinking about this late last night too, like one thing about coordinating people that we talk about every week is how to coordinate people. I think one way that's really effective is to bear witness to what's going on and to not just be the people that normalize it. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Because the more people that say this is completely wrong, this is uninhabitable, this is not right, this is not going to work, this is a do not go down this path, the more that other people will also realize that, and it kind of helps to coordinate a consciousness around that versus just going on with, because a lot of people will go to their jobs today or do whatever they do today and there'll be no mention of any of this, basically.
Yeah.
Well, this is kind of what I was saying about healthy response. If you think about with the pandemic, a lot of human activity kind of got curtailed, and we did see some short-term positive effects from the curtailment of human activity. And it's, James Hillman pointed out that there during these times when we've seen sort of these epidemics of depression, if everyone just simply didn't go to work, if they did just stay in bed, then you would actually see this remarkable transformation, right? You'd see this transformation that is related to the fact that our activity has been effectively misguided, right? If everyone didn't go to work, it would, if it were done intentionally, that would be called a strike.
And of course, there are people that are calling for a general strike right now, of course, too.
Exactly. And this is kind of what I'm saying, is that if we were to give in to the grief, if only for a little while, and let the grief operate through us, and really let feel it and feel the tug of being overwhelmed, if only for a little while, it would actually have a remarkably healing effect.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can see that. The grief needs to lead to hope and determination, not depression and despair.
Yeah.
But the grief can be a tool to get there.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And you know, so if you the tears can wash away a lot of things. And
Yeah, they say the cure for anything is salt water, tears, sweat, or the ocean.
yes, that's exactly
If
right.
one of those three things doesn't solve your problem, then, you know. But no, I do agree though that like a lot of emotional and mental, you know, instability in people when it starts like being acting out, you know, in acts of self-harm or, you know, any kind of like, you know, unhealthy behavior, I think usually comes from ignoring whatever it is for too long. Trying to live with whatever pain is happening for too long and pretending everything is fine. And then you see that people, you know, people develop these other problems because they haven't been able to acknowledge what they're going through.
Yeah,
So I
exactly.
think there would be a really cathartic moment if we as a society could just, you know, because I watch the news briefs on these fires, like I watch them all, and I'm like, they don't mention the climate crisis. They just don't. They say it's another terrible fire season. The loss of life is devastating. How are we going to, you know, what's the, you know, price tag on the damage? You know, they interview a family that had to go through some harrowing circumstance, and then they cut back to what they were doing. They really don't mention the climate crisis. It's really frustrating.
Yeah, and you know, there are a lot of very sensitive souls who grieve for all the animals that die, right? In the Australian fires last year.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, there were you know, like 500 million animals lost their lives.
I think it's actually, the estimates now are that it's higher.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't even
So
want to know how many here now too. So
yeah, exactly. And so but there are sensitive souls who really are impacted by that. I know a friend of mine posted yesterday how
absolutely.
her heart was just like overwhelmed because
Yeah.
she just, you know, she was, you know, thinking about the loss of all the animal life, and it just was too much for her.
Yeah, that was the first thing my partner thought of last night when she saw the fires.
Yeah, there's, if you ever look up on YouTube, or if anybody who's going to listen to this wants to look up on YouTube, there's great interviews with the animal wildlife sanctuaries, all these different people who do this amazing work of trying to rescue these animals, and they go out in trucks and find them burnt, and they bring them back and they bandage them, and the way they talk about it, I mean, it's like they've lost a loved one. I mean, they really they can't even describe the fire without bursting into tears. It's very emotional. And Greta, not to get back to Greta, but you know, she's kind of a personal hero of mine and all of ours. She also started crying in the beginning of a speech that she was doing. I think it was at the UN, and she was talking about biodiversity loss and basically the 6th mass extinction. She just started crying. And I think it really affected this room of adults really deeply, that, you know, she wasn't just stating the facts. They were, you know, again, this idea of bearing witness to what's happening, I think is really powerful.
Well, I think when you actually confront the thought in your brain, fully, completely, it would be hard not to cry. It's just so few of us truly confront it.
Yeah. Personally, I feel like a feeling of like kind of paralysis. Like I feel like terror and paralysis, and then I don't even like deal with grief. I just go straight to like depression, basically. Like yesterday when the sky was like the worst color. I can't even describe this color here. It was like neon yellow mixed with black in the sky. It was like gray, but it was like orange. It was horrible. It was horrible. And today it's still pretty bad, but yesterday it was horrible. This color like makes you sick just to look at it. And I had no energy to do anything because I was like biologically traumatized, I want to say, or some kind
You,
of like,
you can't underestimate the impact of the quality of the air.
yes, yes.
It's like, a lot of people, might not notice that they're not feeling as energetic, they're not feeling as motivated, and it's because of the air they're breathing. And it's not, it's like, it's not the, it's not just emotions. It actually has a physical basis, which is that much particulate. It really impacts, the ability of your body to process. And there's subtle effects as well. If you really, I've said this over and over again, if you want to change the way you think, change the air you're breathing. It's a real thing. So it's no wonder that, in addition to the sort of the worry and anxiety, when you're breathing that kind of air, it's just harder to think clearly. It's harder to feel hopeful.
And then there's going to be an impact on your health that could be felt for years, if not be fatal.
Yeah, that's correct. That's why you need to be really careful. I've curtailed all of my strenuous exercise this week because, just as I'm out here walking fiber, and just as I'm walking, I can taste the smoke. With every breath, I can.
Yes, I experienced that yesterday. Absolutely. I just went to my car and back, and that was basically it. But it's this disgusting, like chemically, like sulfur type, but like smoky, very like, it's like sour. I don't know. It's gross. It's horrible. And like wearing a mask will not help at all.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, that's correct. That's correct.
Or at least the kinds of masks that all of us now are, accustomed to mostly. Yeah, and I just think about like some of maybe we discussed this in the past, but I'm just recalling some of the, the freshest air that I've ever breathed in my life.
In the rainforest?
That feeling, sadly, I've never been to a rainforest, but I've been to many forests. I actually used to live in a forest. It's the San Bernardino National Forest, which is in California. I went to high school there, and I lived there for 2 years, and it's basically in the total wilderness. It is in the wilderness, and it's way high up in the mountains, about a mile high, and, when it would snow or rain there, it was a very special feeling,
Yeah.
Very special feeling.
Well, next time you're in Seattle, let's take a trip up to the Olympic rainforest. It's only a few hours away, and
oh my God, we should bring people out there and make music. We should bring a whole group.
Absolutely, totally.
We should record something out there. That would be amazing.
It's totally. The air is hallucinogenic. It's so clean.
Yeah, I think all of us could use a good deep breath of fresh air, honestly.
Yeah, it's really remarkable.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if you guys had a chance to dig into the article I posted. I don't want to change the subject, but it has been on my mind a lot since the other side of this call is coordination.
Yes.
What did you guys think of that article about the bill before Congress for U.S. blockchain competitiveness?
Yeah, I kind of dug into that a little bit. The Compete Act.
Yeah.
That was the thing that you texted about China as well, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like the incentive, or at least the way the article kind of puts it, is the incentive to kind of put forth this act was to catch up with China. It seemed like that was kind of the angle that the legislators were coming from.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, it's so funny because at the beginning of my career in computing, the Japanese fifth wave was used as an excuse to motivate Congress to tear down some of the antitrust laws so they could create research consortia in the U.S. So my first sort of high-profile job in industry was working for MCC, which was the first U.S. industrial research consortium. And, you know, Admiral Inman, who was instrumental in forming MCC, was the one who went to Congress and said, "Oh, you got to be worried about the Japanese fifth wave. They're going to be so far ahead of us in terms of artificial intelligence and other kinds of computing phenomena, unless we have these consortial research institutions." So that's what pushed Congress over the edge to take down some of the antitrust laws to allow for these cross-company consortia, effectively cooperation. And now a similar kind of thing is happening where, you know, people are using fear, uncertainty, and doubt on the U.S. Congress to help them get a little bit more clued in on what's happening with blockchain.
Yeah, I guess it's their way of getting involved. It's like fear of a foreign adversary is a great motivator. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's yeah, okay, yeah. Here, I'll read a sentence here. It says 4 key recommendations to Congress are to be made by Commerce and the FTC, including how to accelerate development of blockchain in the U.S., a national strategy to advance the United States business sector's position in the world, ways to secure the marketplace and supply chain of blockchain from foreign actors, as well as any legislation that may result in fast adoption of the tech. And then McMorris Rogers, can't remember who that person is now, explained how it was critical to beat China in emerging technology. As we have seen in past global crises and in recent months, the Chinese Communist Party will do whatever it takes to get ahead by stealing, cheating, and subsidizing their state-owned enterprises. We cannot out-subsidize China or beat them at their own game, nor should we. So this act, as I kind of dug into it more, it's basically just saying, hey, everybody, we need to kind of put together some studies, and we need to kind of spend a year investigating and learning. So it's basically just saying, it's just an act that they're putting forward towards the House to say, let's start learning. and it's 6 different sectors, of which, you know, one of them is blockchain, but it starts off talking about AI, and then Internet of Things, and then I can't remember the other ones. But, you know, blockchain was number 5.
Greg, do you think it's ultimately possible for the United States to, I guess, I don't know if there's really an end goal with blockchain, but to really like compete with China on, like, effectively on these issues?
So the thing is, blockchain is global. There aren't nation state boundaries you can draw around blockchain.
Right.
So
I always forget about that.
It's a gross misunderstanding. That said, I mean, one of the things that's really striking, I think the reason that DeFi is so hot in China is because all of these instruments, which are so clearly securities, are not deemed securities in China. If you would try to do the DeFi instruments, so DeFi is the industry term for decentralized finance. And all of these instruments are really clearly securities. They're all lending and futures instruments. If you tried to make those instruments here, the SEC would be all over you. But they're not in China, at least to the best of my understanding. They don't view them as securities in the way that the US and the European markets would deem them as securities. So there's a lot more, or there's a lot less regulatory oversight in China. And as a result, we just saw the massive market correction at the end of last week. So with these things having lost, you know, millions and millions and millions of dollars of investor dollars, which we knew was coming. The technologies themselves are not mature enough to bear that kind of risk, which is what I keep saying over and over and over again. You don't want this. You don't want these technologies in mission critical places right now, where you're talking, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars, or loss of life, or loss of other kinds of property. You know, the technologies are just too nascent to reasonably bear that kind of risk. But in China, they're willing to do it, and people are just getting their, you know, their hair shaved off their heads as a result, because most of them are scams, and even the ones where they're sincere and honest, they haven't worked out the details to like anything like what's reasonable. So that's on the DeFi side, and I think what we really need to do, though, is to foster safe exploration of these technologies. And there's plenty of places to go for safe exploration. I just tweeted out that if you just do the analysis, click to play is far greater in most internet properties than click to pay, right? You only have to think of the top 5 internet properties: Google, Facebook, Instagram, you know, and they're, you know, and on and on and on, Twitter, and you notice that there is zero click to pay. It's all click to play, right? In the sense that your engagement with the application is to communicate or search for information or share information. There's no payment in sight for most users of those properties, and so there's lots and lots of safe places to go with respect to the daily activity of most people on the internet that doesn't involve, you know, risk of high volumes of dollars. And so that's a good place for blockchain to begin and still have impact on society, right? In the same way that Google had an impact on society and Facebook had impact on society. I don't know if that makes sense, my little diatribe there, but.
Yeah. It's like it's still, you know, a really confusing thing for even, you know, the most advanced and people who really understand what's going on when you have some type of a currency that can also do smart contracts. It's like, what is that then? And like, it's just what I'm still confused about, and probably will be for a long time, is exactly like China's approach to it, because in the meantime, they're open in some ways and extremely closed in others, it seems like China governmentally, with their digital renminbi, which I think, you know, the plan would be to have that definitely a very controlled, a top-down controlled blockchain-based digital money system. I'm just how they're going to implement that. It's still a big mystery.
Oh yeah, no, but the thing is that once you the analysis that I make, you know, is probably naive, almost certainly it's naive, but but I think it still has some value. Money is clearly one of our coordinating super tools, right? If coordination is our superpower, then money is like Iron Man's suit, in the sense that it's this, it's this ridiculously effective tool that Homo sapiens have used to coordinate each other. But it used to be that in order to build something that had the properties of money, you effectively had to have a nation state. Right? You had to have a standing army. You had to have all these things to ensure that money was utilized within the parameters that it was envisioned to be utilized for. But that's no longer the case. The cryptography and the technology makes it possible to, with the press of a single button, create a thing that acts just like money. And so you can have all of this coordination superpower without all of the operational cost. You don't have to stand up nation states in order to do that. And that's the thing that people haven't caught on to yet. And it's really, when we talk about climate, it's really important because so much of the climate problem is a human coordination problem. Right? We need to coordinate ourselves better in terms of the way we live our lives, but we also need to coordinate ourselves in terms of how we respond to the crises that we have created for ourselves. And so
yeah, absolutely.
So the idea that we have this new toolkit for coordination where we can explore many more coordination models, it's like a godsend. It's like, wow, the timing couldn't be better.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And one thing, actually, I know that this call has been a little bit negative in the beginning, but this is just reality, sorry. One thing I'm thinking about is kind of a silver lining, and something I think about quite often with relation to all the calamities with our social networks and our public discourse, politics and all of that stuff, democracy, kind of being under attack, and then also the climate crisis and all of the, all the trouble that causes. It's all really, human caused. I don't want to say man-made, because I'm sure there are some women that participated too. Human caused, circumstances. These things did not just fall from the sky, as a random event. In fact, the word disaster actually comes from dis, meaning bad, aster, meaning star, because there, in ancient civilizations, there are a lot of people who believe that whenever there was a certain type of a shooting star or some other kind of star, that would mean, the plague was coming or something bad was about to happen. And that's why we use the term disaster. But my point being is that we can solve these problems. You know what I mean? Like, they are human caused. And that, to me, is one of the places where I find hope, when we're talking about coordination or talking about the, issues with social media or the internet or anything. We can solve them. So.
Well, I agree. I believe that. I mean, I think as Daryl said, it's not like we're going to turn around the effects of climate change in our lifetimes, but we can ease the burden of the people who are going to bear the brunt of the.
Well, I would say it's unlikely that we'll be able to do that, but there are a lot of things that, people didn't ever think we were going to be able to do, and then a few years later we did.
But that's also true. That's
you know what I mean? Like, we don't know if there's some incredible carbon sequestration, technology, and then obviously that would still take years to go into effect. But like, we don't know. You know, I'm sure that there were times that people thought that you'd never be able to go from one end of the planet to the other in less than a day, but we can do that now with an airplane.
Yes. Yes.
You know, and other things, you know, like video chat, FaceTime, stuff that we totally take for granted now. But, you know, if you could tell people in the 1920s that you could do that, I mean, they would probably think you were insane. Or even in the 1950s, you know, and that
you're
was
absolutely right.
You know?
You're absolutely right. You're so right.
So
I always hold out hope. You're right. You're
just
right
leaving a little room for miracles. That's all.
You absolutely. It's really important to do that.
But no,
I agree.
We shouldn't hold out for that, though.
You shouldn't hold out, but I think you really kind of made an important point, and that is, in order to actualize a dream, you have to believe in it first. It's very practical, actually. You know, you have to have the audacity to believe that this could happen, and then you start to execute on it. And that's not
exactly
just pie in the sky hippie talk. You know, it's like
no, but it's
actually
true, though.
very, very practical.
Yeah. And one person who I continually learn that from is Elon Musk, because obviously, not just because he's such an ambitious person, and because I think his companies, you know, have a through line of trying to, you know, help society. The latest one being, of course, Neuralink, which is really interesting. But one great thing that Elon Musk, well, I can't say for sure he said it, but I think he said it. I've seen it circulated around the internet. Is one great way to push yourself is to try to achieve your 10-year plan in 6 months. And of course, you know, you're probably not going to achieve it, but you'll get a hell of a lot farther than if you hadn't set that goal in the first place.
Yes, totally. There's no question. That's one of the things I live by.
Yes, we know, Greg.
Well, I mean, I just think, you know, one of the most magical things about setting an aim is that almost certainly your aim is off, right? But it's because you set the aim, and if you actually, you know, complete what you set out to do, then you get the chance for your aim to be improved, right?
Yeah.
And it's not gonna work if you don't do that. So this is a real fact about you know, human nature that we forget about, and we need to be reminded again and again. So in terms of next week's call, Daryl, do you want to just, you know, give a little bit of a advertisement for who our guest is going to be?
Oh, that's a great idea.
Yeah, so we have lined up next week Dr. Pedro Baez from the Blockchain for Climate Institute, and it should be a really, really interesting call. He's extremely well credentialed and very awesome guy to talk to. So we're really looking forward to kind of, it's going to be a pretty nerdy talk, I think, but it's going to be pretty exciting.
Well, what's his doctorate in, or what's he a doctor of?
I believe he has a PhD in aerospace engineering or something like that. I'm not exactly.
I thought it was aeronautics engineering. Anyway, we'll look it up.
Aeronautics engineering.
Yeah.
So he's a rocket scientist.
He's literally a rocket scientist.
So when you say it's not rocket science, he'll say, actually it is.
And so of course he's very passionate about blockchain and climate. And actually his area of focus in blockchain is finance. So he can speak to that a lot as well. But yeah, very fascinating person, and a really fascinating organization that they've started. It's essentially a think tank at this point, but it's They are like pretty well credentialed, and yeah, it's just going to be, I think it's going to be exciting.
That's very interesting. That's yeah, I'm looking forward to meeting and talking with him. It's good to see that we're starting to get some consensual validation. Right, last week we talked with Manolia, and what was her partner's name? Remind me.
Basil,
thank you. And they've hit upon coordination and as one of the central aspects of addressing climate change. And now we're talking to another institute that's looking at the role of blockchain, which is effectively a coordination tool in addressing climate change. So it's great to start getting some consensual validation that this is an important direction to begin to pursue.
Yeah, and all these people will be great to talk with about RChain as well, because we're going to be expanding the RChain network with every person that we talk to about all this. So
yeah, absolutely. We want to I was speaking of expanding the RChain network. I was saying this, but I was muted about the congressional bill. Whether it passes or not, I think it's really important for us to reach out to the legislators and their staff about RChain, just to educate them and let them know, what we're up to, what we're about, why we're doing what we're doing, and what makes RChain unique.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just looking right now at the bill itself, and one part of it says one of their goals is to establish a list of industry sectors that implement and promote the use of blockchain technology, and establish a list of public-private partnerships focused on promoting the adoption and use of blockchain technology. So there you go. Yeah. I think you're spot on. I think we should, reach out to them as soon as we possibly can.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think we're getting close to the end of the call.
Nora, indeed, we are. This has been a great conversation. Thank you so much for always being available to talk about all these really important subjects. Honestly, I sort of consider it therapy to be able to have a conversation about the climate. Of course, there's so many other amazing things happening in technology and blockchain too. There's plenty of that to talk about, but I do think it's emotionally cathartic to be able to stay in touch about this stuff. So thank you all so much, and thank you to everybody who's listened, and please join us next week as well for our fantastic esteemed guest. And you can become a member of RChain at rchain.coop. Please subscribe to RChain on YouTube and follow us on Instagram and all of our other social media. And if you'd like to be a guest or know somebody who'd like to be a guest, you can email us at climate@rchain.coop. So thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Greg. Thanks, Nora. See you next week.